Good morning. Welcome to my kitchen. I am up, showered, dressed, my bed made, and I'm ready to leave the house to go meet our one of our adult sons because he's taking me out to lunch today. But before I go, I want to get a batch of cookies made so that I have something healthy to eat that appeals to me and that I'm looking forward to, instead of being distracted by a chocolate chip cookie that I know is on the menu for the place that I'll be meeting my son for lunch. I just stepped into the pantry to get my apron because this doesn't make good cooking attire. So let's take the, what does my daughter call this? I can't remember the name of what she has labeled those. But they don't make good cooking attire, and it's just to kind of wear out. So I'll put on my apron, and I have to, it's a little too long down here, so I use a hair tie to catch it up because it's not one of my favorite aprons that has one of those ring loops that I can tighten up the apron. A duster, that's what she calls it. She calls those things a duster. She's given me a couple. That one was from her. When I put on my apron, I feel like I put on my uniform and that I'm ready to set to work. Okay, so now to get out the ingredients for making the cookies. Well, I also think I'll take my earbuds out because I'm not listening to anything. A lot of times when I'm working in the kitchen, I'm listening to a podcast or a YouTube teaching video or something, but that's not the case today. The place that I'm meeting my son today is kind of a fast food place. You step up and you place your order, and then you get your food and go sit down to your table. And we're trying to, squeeze in time because he's using his lunch break from work to meet up with me. And I was saving time by looking at the menu to see what was offered and see what I want to eat, will enjoy eating, but that will also kind of stay within the parameters of my weight and wellness goals. And I saw that they had 2 desserts on the menu, and I love sweets. I love to finish a meal with sweets. And one of the desserts was baklava, and the other was chocolate chip cookies. So you can see that on the screen. And the baklava doesn't really tempt me, but the chocolate chip cookie does. So I thought, okay, what can I do to be able to enjoy the sweet, have a cookie? A cookie sounds really good to me. A couple cookies sounds really good to me. So I thought of the cookies that I saw that a friend made the other day. She made a butterscotch, pecan, coconut cookie with her homemade cookie mix. And I will share all the information in the description box so you can do exactly the same thing. So I pulled out some Lily's baking chocolate chips, butterscotch flavored baking chips. These are they're sweetened with stevia. So if you have a ragweed allergy, then stevia doesn't really, likely does not agree with you. And so this wouldn't necessarily be something that you would want to consider. And I don't know what other sugar-free, other sweetener would be used in a butterscotch chip. So I don't know where to point you for that. So this video is not for you. Actually the video is for you because you could use this cookie mix to make other kinds of cookies. You could make you could find some chocolate chips that are not sweetened with stevia, maybe they're sweetened with some other kind of blood sugar friendly sweetener. So I pulled out the butterscotch flavor baking chips, and then I have some organic unsweetened coconut chips. Now these are big flakes. You might be able to see the size of them. They're big flakes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to toast these up in my air fryer and then break them up so that then I'll have some toasted coconut to use for other recipes, but I'll also have, I can make these flakes smaller and use them in my cookies. And the other thing I have is a package from Trader Joe's. These are from Trader Joe's, and these pecan pieces, dry, unsalted, dry toasted pecan pieces. They are also from Trader Joe's. And so I pulled those out of my freezer. And these are the things that I will be using to add to the cookie dough after I make the cookie mix. So I'm starting from having to make the Laura Slote's fabulous baking flour. I'm going to show you that, and then I will use that in making her cookie mix that she also put together. So this will be multi-steps, and it may not be something you want to do, but I want to do it because I know that having these cookies for me will be easier on my blood sugar than using a white flour sugar, a cookie with white flour and white sugar. All right, I pulled out the things that I'm going to need to make all of this, and I first need to start by making Laura Slote's fabulous baking flour. It's flour in quotation marks because it's not a flour. It's low carb and it's low fat, which is hard to come by when you're trying to do a gluten-free, keto friendly, low carb friendly, low fat friendly baking blend substitute. It's hard to come by that because a lot of flours that you would buy in the grocery store, or flour substitutes that you would buy in the grocery store, they're filled with rice flour or other kinds of flour substitutes that still have a lot of carbohydrates in them. And I want to start from the basis of a fuel pull foundation for a lot of my cooking things. So this baking flour accomplishes that. I need to get my phone off from there because it's buzzing. Okay, so I am going to just label a baggie with this baking flour mixture, Laura Slote's fabulous baking flour mixture, because while I'm making it up to use it in the recipe, I don't need the whole quantity of it. It's going to be a part of the recipe. So I will label that. And then, since I'm going to be filling up this baggie with the ingredients, I pulled out my little handy dandy baggie stand thing so that I don't have to worry about holding the bag open for myself. This is my extra set of hands in the kitchen. The first thing I need to put in to make Laura's baking flour substitute is oat fiber. And oat fiber is not the same thing as ground oatmeal. Oat fiber is, it's fiber. It's the fiber of the oats, from the husk of the oats. And so I keep my oat fiber in this jar, and it calls for a cup, but because of the opening of the jar, I'm going to do, so I can get in and out easily, I'm going to do 4 quarter cups to make my equivalent of a cup. It's very dusty, so I'm careful not to fluff up the dust. And I've got in 2. I shake it to level it off. There's 3. And there's 4. Okay, so that is oat fiber. And I will, all the stuff that you need for this will be in the description box of the video. The next thing I need is 3 tablespoons of organic coconut flour. So I have this container that I probably picked up at Walmart a while back, and I keep in my freezer. And I am going to measure out the 3 tablespoons, but I'm doing it in a little little strainer because there's lumps in this, and I want to make sure that I get all the lumps out before I add it to the mixture. And then let me check the other recipe, the cookie mix recipe, and make sure I don't need to leave this out, and then I can just go put this away. No, this isn't needed again. So this is just needed for Laura's baking flour mix. Okay, the next thing I need is 3 tablespoons of golden flax that's finely ground. Now, I don't know whether Laura buys the ground golden flax or whether she grinds it herself. Let me see if I can reach out and check with her and verify that. I should have checked that detail beforehand. Okay, I just got off the phone with Laura to verify that she is using 3 tablespoons of ground flaxseed instead of taking 3 tablespoons of flaxseed and grinding it. So I will show you something in this process of grinding flaxseed. I will measure out 2 tablespoons, and I think I'm going to come close to the 3 tablespoons when I do that. This is just an experiment while I'm making the video to you guys to show you. So, oh, and this grinder, this is, what is it, a kitchen, I don't know. I'll link it in the description box, but this is my favorite way to have a coffee grinder. You don't have to use this brand, but any brand where the chamber that you grind things in comes out of the grinder itself. So the base is the motor, and then you can take the cup in and out, because then after you grind something, this is easy to wash out. But if you have a grinder you can't take it apart, it becomes difficult to clean the grinder. So anyway, that's my little tip on a small grinder that is, usually you'll find it listed as a coffee grinder. So I will grind the seed, and then I will measure it out to see how much 2 tablespoons of seed measures out as ground seed. I wanted to spare you the noise of the grinding. All right, it is ground, and I'm gonna pack it into here. Make sure I get everything out, and then I will measure out 3 tablespoons. Do I have 3 tablespoons of ground flaxseed from 2? Oh, definitely from 2 tablespoons of seed. I even have a little bit more. Okay, so I'll just set that aside and save it for something else. That will go in the freezer, because once you grind flaxseed, the omega-3 oils in it begin to deteriorate. They can go rancid quickly, so they're the best to do it freshly ground if you can. Now, some people will grind up some of their flaxseed so that they have the ground flaxseed flour, and then they will keep it in their freezer. And that's one thing you could do. But I just grind it fresh because it's so easy to do with my little grinder. So I'm going to put this away. And my husband said, so what is flax for? He knows I use a lot of golden flax. And I said, for the omega-3s. So I put the label on here. This is one of the best sources for omega-3s for our brain. And you know what? I will link in the description box information about flaxseed and chia seed and omega-3s for the brain. I made a note for myself to do that because chia seed is another excellent source of omega-3s for the brain. So I am kind of pushing this through the sieve a little bit with a spoon, and then the next thing I need to add in here is 2 tablespoons of almond flour. So that is sitting right here. And again, this has been in the freezer and it's a little lumpy, so it's another reason to use the sieve to get this through, make sure it's nice and smooth to add to the oat fiber. Okay, so I will get this through the sieve and be back in a second. All right, this is all sifted nicely, and it's going to go in here. And now I have a small batch of Laura's Slote's Fabulous Baking Flour. And I will, actually let me blow a little air into that and mix it all together by shaking it in the bag. So just shake it up well. And then for the cookie mix that Laura created, I only need a 1/4 cup of this. And I have a cup and something. So anyway, I will have that. And I could have tripled it or quadrupled it or whatever, but I just wanted to make this small batch as a demo for you. So there's that. That'll be an ingredient for the cookie mix. And the next thing I'm going to do is put all the ingredients of the cookie mix into my Vitamix blender, because that's how I'm going to blend that all together, because it calls for 2 tablespoons of oat flour, which is ground oats. And the oats don't act like the flaxseed. I'm just going to measure out 2 tablespoons of oats to make my oat flour. I don't know what it is about the seeds, why when you grind a certain amount you end up with a whole lot more, but that's what happens with it. But it doesn't happen the same way with the ground oats. So I'm just using 2 tablespoons of ground oats. There's my lid. And I'll set that aside. It calls for, I put that in first because I know that it needs to be ground. So they're down next to the grinding apparatus here. It calls for 1½ cup almond flour. My almond flour is still a little frozen in here. Let me kind of jab at it and break it up. And I'll measure that into the blender. If I measure all these dry ingredients into the blender and then pour it up, it basically serves the purpose of grinding the oats and mixing everything together uniformly. And this is a 1/4 cup measure. And because of the lumps, I'm having to kind of measure, be careful on my measures. So I need 1½ cups. So I'm going to start with the ½ cup idea of doing 2 1/4 cups. Still trying to break up the lumps in this frozen almond flour. I keep the almond flour in the freezer so that it doesn't go rancid on me, because almond flour has the fats in it. And this cookie recipe will not, once the cookies are made, they will not be a fuel pull because of the fat in the almond flour. And I don't do a lot of baking with almond flour for that reason. But for these cookies, it will be worth it. I make an exception. Now I think I'll switch to the ½ cup measure. It can go in here, but I still have some big lumps I want to break up and not mess up my measuring because of big lumps. So break those up. Okay, now I need 2 ½ cups to make the remaining cup of almond flour that I need. There's 1/2 and the other half. So 1½ cups almond flour. I'm going to pause and put these things away in my pantry. Correction, I put the almond flour in the freezer that's in the laundry room and the oatmeal in the pantry. I like to clean up as I go so that when I finish baking, cooking, whatever, I don't feel overwhelmed by the mess that remains. So I just clean up as I go. The next thing that's on the list is a half a cup of a on-plan sweetener. And in my case, well, Laura wrote the recipe with Gentle Sweet, and that's a Trim Healthy Mama product, but I can't use that because of some allergies and tummy reactions that happen in some of my loved ones. So I am using allulose, and I pretty much measure allulose measure for the Gentle Sweet, and this calls for half a cup of Gentle Sweet. So I'm going to get that half cup Gentle Sweet in here. Well, sorry, not half cup Gentle Sweet, half cup allulose. And I will have a link in the description box about some reviews on allulose and why it is actually a healthy on-plan sweetener to use instead of sugar. So there's that. And let me put this away in the pantry. The next thing that was called for in the recipe is the 1/4 cup of baking blend. And that's a reference to the Trim Healthy Mama baking blend. But Laura makes her own baking blend, and I'm copying her. So I'm using a 1/4 cup of her fabulous, what does she call it? She calls it her fabulous baking flour. So I'm putting a 1/4 of a cup of that in here. And the next thing called for is 2 tablespoons of oat flour, ground oats, and I put the oats in there, and that this grinding up, mixing up process will do the grinding. I need 1 teaspoon of baking soda. So put that in. And I need 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking powder. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my half teaspoon measure and let it be a little bit above the top of the line. So 3/4 teaspoon baking powder, and then half a teaspoon mineral salt. And so I'm going to pour that in here because this is a half teaspoon measure. And that's it. Those are the ingredients. So now what I'm going to do is put it on my Vitamix stand and whir it up. Okay, let me give you a tip. It doesn't whir up very well in the Vitamix blender, so I'm transferring it to, I better put the blade in here so it doesn't fall through. I'm transferring it to my food processor. So let's put it in there. It's basically, it got kind of impacted down here, and I'm thinking, no, that's not working well. So we adjust. And I'm pretty sure it'll do a whole lot better if I just move it to the food processor. And then I'm going to show you one of my little kitchen habits that may disturb you, but that's not my problem. It works for me, and I have to save time where I can. All right, so everything that was kind of stuck to the bottom is out. And then I will food process this. Some did fall through the little crevice, so let me scrape that into here. All right, I'm going to turn on the hot water and get it running hot, and then I'll show you what I'm going to show you. Okay, this is my lazy cook thing. I don't spend much time washing my blender out. I use a hot rinse immediately after I have dirtied it. And if it rinses clean and it doesn't look, and it's not greasy and there's not food stuck on, I call it good. So, And the sprayer, I didn't even use the sprayer, but the sprayer adds a little extra power to it. So that's what I wanted to share with you. I use my Vitamix blender a lot, and it saves me time. That as soon as I'm done using it, if I rinse it out well with hot water, it's good. I look to see if it looks greasy, you know, beaded water inside and it hasn't cleaned out well, then I'll use some soap to clean it up. But otherwise, it just gets rinsed with hot water. Same with the lid. As soon as it's done. Okay, so the flour mixture's in here, or the cookie mixture is in here, and now I'm just going to whir it up. Yes, that was a much better move, because otherwise it was just staying down on the bottom of the Vitamix. So giving it a little space, more surface space, and blending it up has mixed it nice and uniformly. So now I have the cookie mix to go ahead and make my cookies with. Okay, operator error. I just realized I did not put in the ½ teaspoon of glucomannan into Laura's fabulous baking flour mixture. So I'm going to do that, even though I've already taken out a ¼ cup to make my mix. I'm going to recover from this mistake. That'll get shaken up. I'll mix that up later. And now what am I going, well that was only a ¼ teaspoon. I have the measurement written on it. So I'm going to do the full ½ teaspoon in there, even though a ¼ cup content was already removed. And then on my cookies, I'm going to dust in my cookie mix, I'm going to dust in a ¼ teaspoon, which will give me more glucomannan than the recipe calls for, but so be it. I'll put those ingredients away in a minute. And what I need to do next is my cookie mix is going to go in here, because I use this entire cookie mix to make the recipe of these butterscotch coconut pecan cookies that Laura enticed me with on a Marco Polo that we're on together. So there's the mix going in the bowl, and I need to fluff it up a little bit because of that glucomannan sitting there. You know, and a whisk, a whisk will do the job nicely. That'll blend it up better. Okay, then I need to start melting a stick of butter. I've got some mixture flung onto the counter, so let me get that in the bowl. I need to start melting a stick of butter, because that's what it calls for. 8 tablespoons of butter, that's equal to a stick. I'll put that on the stove top and start to melt that. Put this in the little 2/3 measuring cup that I have that is pretty thick metal. And I'll just put that on low on the stove top. Let that start melting. And then get my bearings with the rest of the recipe. I know I'm going to need to toast the organic coconut chips, so that's what I'll do next, is get those in the air fryer, starting them toasting. All right, I've got 3 trays of the coconut flakes here in my air fryer. And let's see, I am going to turn the temp down to, I think I'm going to turn it down to 300, and then just so I don't leave it in too long, I'm going to try 8 minutes and see what that does. So there that goes. Well, another pivot and adjust. I realized that I'm not going to make it to make the cookies and be on time for our son, so I am going to just continue to work on this recipe when I get back, and Boy, the toasting coconut smells divine. I mean, these beautiful flakes of toasted coconut smells wonderful. So I have cleaned everything up to this point. Let's turn that off. Let's just leave it open. And I'm gonna get ready to leave the house and meet our son. I will show you one of my health and wellness tips before I go. All right, I'm ready to walk out the door, but before I do, I wanna share with you what I do to try to improve my nutrition and not just rely on the food that I'm going to eat out at a restaurant. So on my drive there, I will be eating a raw zucchini and 3 unpeeled organic carrots. I'll put in the description box of this video why I would be doing that. It's connected to the glucose goddess and her teachings and the order of, putting in food to lessen the glucose rise, the rate of rise of the glucose, and maybe lessen the area under the curve. Before I start any meal, I try to have raw veggies, and that is because of the influence of Jessie and Chauspé, also known as the glucose goddess. This is one of her graphics that is floating up the screen as I talk, and I will put information about Jessie and Chauspé in the description box and link my favorite podcast from her in there. I highly recommend that you listen to the podcast and get an education about the order of food and how it affects your blood glucose's behavior. I'm sharing this graphic just so you have some images of some of the things that you could use as raw veggies before having your meal. There's peppers and broccoli and raw cauliflower and zucchini and yellow summer squash and sugar snap peas, green beans. There's many options. And as far as I didn't get the cookies made before I went, well, it took me longer to share what I was doing with you than if I had just stuck to business and done it. But so I have a couple backup plans for when I get to the end of the meal if I still want sweets, not to cave in to the sweet desserts that are at this restaurant. I have a strawberry fuel pull cake, snack cake that I made. Excuse me. I'll put the recipe for that in the description box. I also, in case I feel like chocolate, I have a small Moser Roth chocolate bar. And that image will go up on the screen of what the whole package looks like. I buy these at Aldi and I keep chocolate with me. I don't leave home without chocolate. I'm quite serious. Everywhere I go, I have chocolate with me because you never know when you might have to have some chocolate. So I have 2 dessert options if I feel the need for them. If not, I'll just come home and I'll finish making the cookies and I'll enjoy the cookies with my second meal of the day. So that is my game plan. Well, I made it to the restaurant, the Halal Guys. That's where I will be enjoying lunch with our son. I do wish I'd gotten those cookies made, but maybe having them to finish up when I get back home will keep me running strong for the afternoon because I have other things I want to do too. And sometimes after I go out for lunch and I get back home, it's awful enticing to take a nap. So maybe the cookies will be saving me from being tempted to take a nap. This was my meal that Sam treated me to at Halal Guys. I ordered the lamb bowl. I told them to not use the rice and I didn't want the pita. So the lamb is on extra lettuce and I had all the veggies that they offered and I had a scoop of the baba ganoush, and then I decided to also ask for a side of baba ganoush. I did not choose to have the white sauce as a dressing because the baba ganoush served as my dressing. I didn't like the ingredients that I read on the nutrition facts for about the white sauce. And this, in Trim Healthy Mama fueling terms, would be considered an S meal because it is fueled with fats and it is low in carbohydrates. I am back from having lunch with Sam, and it's time to take off the duster and put the apron back on. Okay, so the oven is preheated for 350. My mix is made. The cookie mix is all mixed up. And all I need to do is beat up 2 eggs, mix it with the butter, and put it in here to make the actual cookie dough batter. So let's crack the eggs. Alright. Okay, no shell in that one. I'm going to use this to make sure there's no shell here. Put that together. Heat it up a little bit. Now my butter is hot, so I don't want to just dump it into the egg yolk because I don't want to, the egg, I don't want to cook the egg, so I'm going to kind of drizzle it in. By putting it in slowly, that helps it not to cook it. Warms it up slowly. That. So it does say you may want more sweetener per directions, as it might be just lightly sweetened. Mix this well. So all the stuff that went in here, and mix this in well. Okay, I'm going to do it with a fork. In my old days, when I cooked with butter and sugar and flour, I made big batches of cookies. So this is a very small batch for me. Now, you see that this is not very stiff. It's really wet. The thing about using alternate flours is you need to give them time. You need to let them set and thicken up. So that's what I'm going to do. And while that has a little bit of time to thicken, let me get a spatula. Make sure it's off the bottom of the bowl. Okay, it is. I will also taste it for sweetness level. See what I think. It is lightly sweetened, not a lot. I think I'm going to go get the allulose and add another 2 tablespoons to this. Okay, so 2 more tablespoons I think ought to do it. Mix that in. And still, I want the batter to be thicker, or the dough, cookie dough, to be thicker. So I'm going to give it a chance to rest. So while I'm waiting on that, I'll show you the trays that I pulled out of the air fryer for the toasted coconut flakes. And it is as simple as just, you know, crushing it up with my fingers to make smaller pieces. Now, I don't think I need to wait for this to thicken before I can add in coconut pieces, so I will do that. And that may serve also to thicken things up. And that was probably, I'm probably putting in I don't know, not a half a cup yet. I just do it by sight. That's how a lot of my cooking is. Good pinches, more than good pinches. So, I know it's hard for you to tell by camera, but I want enough in there so I can taste it or crunch it. Let me rinse my fingers. And let's throw in some pecans. Actually, this is pulled to open on here. So these are already dry toasted. I'm going to taste them, make sure they don't taste rancid. Nope, they taste good. They've been in the freezer. So that may be 3 tablespoons or so. And now for some Lily's chocolate, not chocolate chips, but butterscotch. So there's a handful. And another handful. This is a 7-ounce bag, and I probably used a little less than half a bag here. Let's stir it up and see how it looks. Okay, take a taste of the mixture. That's going to be really nice. Okay, it still needs to thicken. It's too runny for me, but time should take care of that. So I'm going to leave this sitting here waiting, and I'll put all this stuff away. The batter has had time to thicken, so it's much better now. This will make better cookies. So it's time to put the cookies out on the cookie sheet here. Get them in the oven. Now, I know the recipe says we're supposed to get 24 cookies out of it. I'm not going to get 24 cookies out of it. That's tiny little pitiful cookies as far as I'm concerned. So I'm going to do larger cookies. Now, I do not know how this is going to spread. So oftentimes, well, I may need this spoon. Let's see how the batter looks on the parchment. All right, I think it's going to be good right there. So it's not as dry a mix as I would be used to if I were doing with flour and white sugar, white flour and white sugar. This is going to be a whole lot better for the blood sugar. See how many you get out of this batch. And I know it's much larger cookie than was intended to be made, but I don't care. I like big cookies. That's how I want it done. All right, you get the idea of how I'm doing these out on the cookie sheet, so I will finish them up and then show you in a minute. Okay, 11 cookies, that's what I got out of it. What I'm gonna do is take 2 smaller spoons and I'm gonna pull a little dab off each one and make a 12th cookie, and all these will be just a little bit smaller. So I'm going to be fussy about it so I at least get a dozen cookies out of this. All right, I got an even dozen out of here, and they're ready to go into the oven. And I don't remember what the directions said about baking. I will look on my iPad and see what the directions say. I'm going to start it at 8 minutes, and then I'll check on them. Here they are, all baked, all wonderful. I'm so happy. I'm so happy. Well, that's the end of the cookie video. So the description box will have lots of links in it and information on flaxseed and chia seed and omega-3 oils and how that's healthy for your brain and yada, yada, yada. There'll be links in there. And of course, the recipe will be in there for Laura's fabulous baking flour and for the cookie mix, and just check the description box. It'll be rich with stuff.